Hello and welcome to... I've had that sign sitting just out of shot on the floor in the old studio room for about 18 months and I was always like, oh, next week, next week, next week. But of course, next week never came. I thought, new studio, new look. But it's by no means finished. I still need to work on some more sound deadening, shooting angles, lighting, and so on and so on. Pretty much everything, in fact. But I wanted to do something different. And I wanted to stand up for the first time in 6 years. I've always been sitting down. Anyway, I'm sure you will all let me know what you think of it in the comments section, as you always do. And welcome today to what seems like an annual experience now for us both. It's a review of the latest watch by Direnzo. Direnzo are owned and operated by Sergio Direnzo. It's a one-man operation. He designs the watches himself, he quality controls the watches himself, and I always declare my bias when I review his watches because I really like his designs and I like the man himself. He's the only brand owner that I have a video call with each year before I review his watch. He's a nice man. It's just a pleasure to talk to him. I'm sure many of you have had dealings with Sergio over the last 5 years or so, and I'm sure you've all come to the same conclusion. Today, his latest creation is the DRZ06, following on from the 01, the 02, the 03, etc. Now, this is Direnzo's first manual wind watch. It's their first small second complication. Or should that be a wandering star complication? There is a disc where the small second should be. Personally, I quite like small seconds. I find them quite relaxing. You kind of disconnect from the tick, tick, ticking of time. So, do yourself a favour, grab yourself a cup of chamomile tea and settle in for this one. Let's flip the camera and get on with it. Indeed, let's get into it. Packaging today, nothing much to detain us here while we talk about their pre-ordering system and Direnzo's pricing for this one. Now, what Sergio does is he has already ordered these. They open for pre-order on the 10th of January, but the order for the watches has already gone into the factory. That means he can guarantee these ones will be delivered May, June, which is far earlier than if he hadn't already placed the order. I don't know how many he's making. Normally, he gets around 500 to 600 of each piece. So I'm guessing that's your number if you want one of these. 3 different color versions are available. There is a black dialed version, as I will pop up on screen now. There is a green dial version, as I will pop up on screen now. And there is a blue dial version, as I will magically produce from the watch roll right now. Sergio knows I like a bit of colour on my watches, so he sent me the blue dial version this time. Now, available on either a bracelet or a choice of different coloured leather straps. These are 750 Swiss francs pre-order on a leather strap or 840 Swiss francs pre-order on a bracelet. Both will be available for purchase after the initial pre-order phase. So if you want to go for leather now and save yourself 90 Swiss francs, you can come back and order the bracelet for that price a bit later on. Other options to make you aware of: 2-year warranty, by the way, same with all of Direnzo's watches. Like with the last couple, I think the Mondial onwards, he's offering one of these diver style clasps as well. The bracelet normally comes on a butterfly, but I believe for an extra $50 or thereabouts, you can spec on one of these. So if you're a Goldilocks, I'm a Goldilocks, you can put on the diver's clasp, giving you 5 holes of micro adjust rather than the butterfly class version. But the butterfly class version does come with a couple of half links. I've kind of dabbled back and forth on my Direnzos, but I've ended up going back for the butterfly clasp just because I think this is how these watches should be worn. It's a much neater effect than putting a diver's clasp on it. So what then is a DRZ06 Wandering Star, and what is a Wandering Star complication? Well, it's Sergio's interpretation of a small second complication down there at the 6 o'clock. We've seen this before elsewhere. It's kind of a disc with that red dot on it. It's Sergio's signature red dot that he always features on the crown of his watches. So it's nice to see it appearing on the dial today. Like all of Sergio's designs, so much thought, so much geometry, so much precision, so many neat little touches all combine to make a watch that doesn't look like anything else apart, of course, from his other designs. What about the dimensions then? Well, a lot of people, me included, fixate on the diameter dimension of a watch and they won't go above or below a certain number. The diameter dimension of this one is a little bit deceptive in some ways. I think this watch both looks and feels chunkier than several of the dimensions would suggest. Perhaps there's one dimension though that brings everything into perspective. So what am I talking about? Diameter. 37.8mm. This doesn't wear like a sub 40mm watch, it wears at least like a 40. Because I think of that, it's an almost helmet size case shape today, very unusual. I'll show you in just a second or two. Thickness, 10.8mm thick with a 44.8mm lug to lug. So again, compact dimensions, but it just seems a little bit thicker than those figures suggest. Lug width though, very standard 20mm though, as you can see here, flared on both the bracelet and the leather strap. Weight as sized for my 7-inch wrist though, here's the tell, 147 grams. 100 meters of water resistance from a push-pull crown, flat sapphire crystal covering the dial, and the movement in this one. They normally go for SW200s, these Direnzos. This one, however, is a manual wind, so it's an SW216, which you can see today thanks to a display case pack. Now, all of these Sellita 2 series movements are based on the ETA 28 series movements, although interestingly enough, ETA don't do a manual wind version. Also interestingly enough, Sergio assures me that the rotorless version is far more expensive than the standard rotored version, hence the slight increase in price over the DRZ06 and some of his previous models. 2 joules are missing thanks to the lack of rotor, so 24 joules it hacks, it hand winds. Obviously, roughly 42-hour power reserve. One thing to note on production units, they are going to be putting some Geneva stripes on the bridge there and also the Direnzo logo. Just as well, I think it needs that. That would have been on my moans and niggles section today, but he cut me off, damn him. 316L stainless steel case, fixed bezel, crown and stainless steel bracelet today. And hardness coated to 800 Vickers on all of those metal components. Now, interesting case structure with this one. I did reference a kind of helmet shaped structure earlier on. I asked Sergio in our phone call why he decided to put those side scallops on the case of this 06, and he said it was to break it up visually. It doesn't look or feel like a 10.8mm thin watch. I think it would have looked even thicker. I understand why he did that. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of those side scallops, but I understand why he did it. It might have looked a little bit slab-sided if he hadn't. The bracelet is pretty much a carryover from the DRZ02R. In fact, if you already own a DRZ02R, you can use the bracelet from that one on this one. Save yourself 90 Swiss francs. Get a leather strap that fits both watches as well. However, this one has got little chamfers to the edges of it that the bracelet on the DRZ02R does not. Butterfly clasp, as discussed, 2 half links. Also, as discussed, you can get a diver's clasp if you want to instead. We've already seen the 6mm crown with Sergio's red dot in the middle, matching the wandering star on the dial. I think one of the most interesting features of the case, though, are the lugs here. They're scalloped inwards, they're kind of concave, very, very unusual. I'll put it on a standard non-Direnzo supplied leather strap earlier on, and you'll see why Sergio has gone for those kind of flared straps and flared bracelet. It just doesn't look quite right. Really interesting piece of design though, as always with Sergio. If I put that photo back up that I showed you in the intro of him sitting at his desk, crucially, what's he sitting behind? He's got a couple of vintage cars on his desk. Real kind of swoopy, vintage Bugatti racing car lines from this watch and all of his other designs. And these lugs definitely in keeping with that ethos, with that design aesthetic. Dial and hands, it may not look like anything other than a Direnzo, but it definitely looks like a Direnzo. This bold dial, now that is BOWLED, very much a Direnzo signature. He has been doing this since the 02, way back in 2017, 2018. I think that was the first Direnzo I ever reviewed. I likened the 02 to crop circles at the time, these almost extraterrestrial patterns. I think very appropriate then that we're talking about a wandering star complication with this one as well. And it's a sandwich dial. You've got the bowl at the edges, you've got that circular brushed metallic center section, you have got a recess running in between those two, and little lines, little bridges linking the two sections of the dial containing those circular indices. So many circles here, all nicely in proportion to each other as well. Now with a dial this pretty, you don't need to overbrand it, and indeed he hasn't. Just the Direnzo logo, the Direnzo name, and Genève, because these are obviously Swiss made. Interestingly enough though, doesn't say Swiss made on the dial, but it does say it on the case back in case you're worried. Now the handset, the hour hand and minute hand are both flat, high polished silver surrounds, tapering out towards their edges. Not particularly remarkable in themselves, but then again they don't need to be when there is that wandering star complication. It's a really nice effect, that red circle just gently rotating once per minute as it does over that white background. There's a little bit of texture to that white background. It almost has a rough paper texture to it when you look at it up this close. There are no second markers though, as I'm sure you noticed, so you're not really going to be timing things all that accurately with your DRZ06. Overall though, it's a really nice effect. There's symmetry, there's geometry, there's patterning on the dial, there's a couple of different surfaces, a couple of different textures, and like all of Sergio's dials, this bowl really sucks in light and spits it back out in a very pleasant fashion. And it does exactly the same thing after dark as well. BGW9 and plenty of it on that sandwich, and on the hands and on the disc. So there's a kind of negative effect. That red dot now becomes a black dot and you see it circulating round and round and round once every 60 seconds. Very, very nice indeed. It would be disappointing therefore if it faded quickly, but it doesn't. It hangs on in there until the end of my 20-minute test. Perhaps they could have done with another couple of layers on the hands themselves, but overall it's as pretty after dark as it is during the day. Alright, on wrist, lots of wrist shots today because I have one bracelet and two different leather straps to show you, plus I'm going to put it on a non-Direnzo leather strap just to show you why you should stump up the cash for the Direnzo ones instead. Chunky. Don't be worried about that 37.8mm diameter. In fact, you should probably be worried about the weight instead if you're going to worry about anything. 150 grams for this size of watch, definitely it's a bit of a chunker, but looks lovely, 10.8mm thick, sits nice and flat, nice and flush on the wrist, and heaps of taper on the bracelet from about 26 where it leaves those lugs all the way down to 18 at the butterfly clasp. Alright, straps. Two straps are available as options. This black one, which has a rather plain finish, high polish hardware Direnzo logo. That one, I don't think it suits this blue dial. I think the black one really suits the black dial version of the watch, but yeah, I wouldn't be opting for this one if I was picking blue or green. I would be going for the brown. I think it's a much better match or a much better mismatch, if you see what I mean. Plus you get a little bit of extra visual interest with a kind of grain pattern to the top. Same high polished hardware with the Direnzo logo on it. And this is German vegetable tan leather. How do I know? That's how I know. If you have ever experienced German vegetable tan leather straps, you'll be smelling the same thing through your chosen device right now. It's a really good strap. This animal did not die in vain, I promise you that. But don't think that 20mm lug width means you'll be using your selection of 20mm lug width straps that you have lying around the house, because I don't think you will. It just looks weird. The case shape is wrong, the lug profile is wrong, the kind of scalloped lug profile also just doesn't work with a standard strap. Trust the man who designed the watch. If he thinks it needs flaring from the strap at the lugs, it's because it does. That's the overhead shot. You know, legibility is actually quite reasonable on this particular model because of the color contrast. White silver hands against the blue dial, but yeah, it's not a diver. It's not about legibility. It's about style, and this watch has it in spades. But I still managed to find a few things to complain about. I still managed to find a few moans and a few niggles. I like the Direnzo look, but you might not like the Direnzo look. This kind of geometric precision look is not going to be for everybody, and it does lose some practicality in that today. No minute markers, no second markers. There's a reason I suggested you have a chamomile tea and relax. You're going to have a slightly more relaxed attitude towards timekeeping with this one than you would do with most other watches. And I found a little glitch in this butterfly clasp on the prototype. If you clip it bottom first and then top, it's fine. But if you clip it, hold on, top first and then bottom, oops, the top pops back out again. They will have to rectify that for production units. Now, I've already said I agree with Sergio. I think the case shape needs a broad leather strap. It needs that flaring out at the lugs. That is a lot of leather though. Visually, almost gives off a whiff of bund. And when I say the word bund, I can feel people's skin crawling. So you're gonna have to be all right with a lot of leather on your wrist if you want to wear this one on leather. And I think he's gone very conservative, too conservative with the colour palette of these watches. Blue, green and black, that's your lot. Where's the burnt orange? Where's the purple? Where are some of the signature colours we've come to expect of Direnzo? All right, 3 standard ones, fair enough, but we needed another colour, I think. We needed something with a little bit of vibrancy, a little bit more pop than is currently provided. And I've gone on record saying the DRZ02R is a future classic. Look at that case profile, absolutely magnificent. This DRZ06 on the right doesn't quite have the same level of elegance. It is a little bit more helmet-like than previous models. But I think Direnzo are at the point where none of that really matters. If you're a fan of the brand, you've probably already got your credit card in hand waiting for the 10th of February and hoping that the choice of colour, your choice of colour, hasn't sold out before you buy one. It just becomes a bit of a no-brainer. It becomes a bit of a must-have to buy the next of his designs, the next watch to add to your ever-increasing Direnzo collection. And that is surely an enviable position for a micro brand to be in. So there you have it. If you like Sergio's designs, you really can't go too far wrong with one of his watches. I think they're very fairly priced for what you get. They always sell out. Bit of exclusivity means they retain their value solidly also. And they don't look like anything else on the market apart from Sergio's other designs, that is, of course. I'll finish by saying, as I always do, that I look forward to seeing what he's going to come up with next. Well done, you've made it all the way to the end. Why not reward yourself by watching another Direnzo review? What about the 04 or the 02R? Take your pick. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again in the next one.